and welcome to a very special episode of BaatShaat. Here with me today, somebody will be joining in a few seconds whose name doesn't need a mention. Like, you know him. We've talked plenty about him in our shows as well. And he was a cricket player, former New Zealand star, a bowler, fast bowler primarily, and then he finished his career back in 1997 and went on to become one of the most in some ways enterprising commentator or analyst of the game. So without further ado, I'm going to add Danny Morrison to our show. Welcome, Danny.
Salman, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Yeah, very well, mate. So we're in lockdown here in Trinidad, but
what a perfect time to get
back in the Caribbean's great, but look, just got to be tied down for 7 days.
How did you find the lockdown, in Australia where you're based out of now versus now here in West Indies? Is there a massive difference? Because they haven't been affected that much, have they?
No, I'm very spoiled where I am north of Brisbane. And so when I think about the COVID thing, it's been really quite smooth for the Aussies in that part of the world and in Queensland because of the climate, quite mild winters. And so it has been a very easy time compared to, I think, very populated parts of the globe. Of course, this COVID is so contagious. Yeah, very spoiled.
And Australians are so socially distanced anyways. Everybody's live off the coast anyways, right? So,
It's a big rock, as Kiwis say. They call us the Shaky Isles of New Zealand. For understandably. And then
absolutely.
You're right. It's such a big continent. I mean, Australia is a continent, but it
is massive. It is massive. Yeah,
so much around the edge, as you're saying.
Exactly. So, again, Danny, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to speak with you today. It has been, trust me, since I started talking to Mark Coles about 8 or 9 months ago, first thing I said to him, I would love to talk to Danny at one point, and here you are. So it is such an honor to have you. I'm going to start off, I talked about this show as Tale of Two Lives, and I always followed you as a sportsman. As a cricketer, I was a big fan of you because out of the New Zealand team back when you played, you showed a lot of aggression on the field. You showed a lot of fight, and I became a big fan of yours. So 48 games, 160 wickets in Test cricket, 96 games, 126 in ODIs. What did you consider yourself, a better ODI bowler versus a Test bowler when you played?
You often get asked that, Salman, and when I look back at some other interviews and then times of even live big shows, at events and stuff, people have often asked that. But I think really for us in that generation, and certainly 20th century didn't play this century, is that Test cricket was pretty much the pinnacle. White ball cricket was strong for sure because of the Packer revolution in the late 70s. The Cricket World Cup, the year great countrymen won, 92 with Imran Khan at the helm, was a real watershed time because it was held down under. It was the first time with white ball and coloured clothing in the Cricket World Cup. So a great sort of era in a way to be involved with that real transition. But I mean, you're going about Test cricket, and it really is the pinnacle. And you're going about my aggression. I suppose when you look at fast bowling, it tends to be quite an aggressive act by nature. But it was also for me a lot of passion. You love the confrontation, but it was the joy and the art of playing for me was massive. And being somewhat of a hobbit, a midget under 6 foot, for a quick bowler, it's going to be challenging. So I had a lot of joy in sort of then fighting, and it wasn't like I was trying to prove anything. It was just fighting against your non-attributes and just wanting to play the game you loved. So it was a lot of fun for me and a real enjoyment.
So, talk about punching above your weight, which you did for many years for New Zealand. You think, with the advent of T20 cricket, if you were still playing, you could have carried that into that format as well?
Yeah, I think when you look at the bowlers today, Salman, the quick guys, you've got so many more options in terms of repertoire, and you have to come up with stuff. And so it's funny whereas some of us, mucked around and tried a little bit of different things with slightly split fingers. I mean, today they just do a whole raft of stuff. Yeah. And the great thing about running up and just changing your grip, and even going across seam and just breaking your wrist, or just even coming wide of the crease and trying to cross it. It's just something different. Yeah. Everyone was so paranoid about ruining the ball for the other guy or the spinners and keeping one side so shiny. and the other side so rough, apart from reverse swing, it was really just about orthodox swing prior to probably really Pakistan letting the cat out of the bag, as it were. As soon as Imran retired from that World Cup in '92, everyone started to understand what was going on a bit more. And so, I take my hat off to them in T20 because it's such variety. And bowlers have to be smart and inventive and initiate different deliveries, because otherwise you're going to get pumped. Batters tend to dominate. Look at the blades they're using, all that sort of stuff. But I would have loved to have had more of a crack. I sort of had a little inkling of it right at the end, because Martin Crowe, the late great Martin Crowe, had a game called Cricket Max. Now, he's way ahead of his time. So if people probably Google that and have a look at that on YouTube, it is 2020 effectively, but it's 4 lots of 10 overs and very much a baseball theme in terms of more innings, because, T20, 50-over cricket, you've really got 1 innings each, right? Whereas in Test cricket, you've got the 4 innings in Test match cricket. That's what Crowe loved about it, the purest side of it. And Marty Crowe, with an American friend, was ahead of his time because he also had those zones. It was these big zones with 2 poles up. And if you hit the ball down the ground, so basically back over the bowler's head with a lovely straight bat, to where it came from, went through the zones, because there was a big painted shape, almost like a square, funny-shaped square rectangle type thing, painted on the ground. It was called the max zone. So if you belted the bowler back over his head and it went through these big poles and painted area called the max zone, 6 became 12 and 4 became 8. So you doubled your score, but you had to hit it beautifully. And that's what Crowe wanted to. He wanted to reward a good cricket shot, which was beautiful, straight bat, boom. And if you were facing the bowl and you top edged it, you went to hook and top edge, and went over slip, keep a third man area, it still was only 4 or 6. So he wanted guys to hit clean and straight back. So that was around, 97, 98 was a real season of it, where it became a proper league in New Zealand. And then when India and Pakistan sides toured, England played in it. They had the Max Lions from England, and they played in a series in late 97. So it was starting to get traction, but because it was so radical at the time in the late 90s, I think it was just far too far advanced for its time.
Well, as soon as you talked about hitting a straight ball and doubling your output, I see a comment here that says, "My heart goes in Danny's voice, bahut acha."
Very good, bahut acha.
Exactly. So I think, Martin Crowe, you're talking about the legend there. He was ahead of his time, and Deepak Patel experiment in 1992 World Cup. I mean, everybody goes to that now, but I think he was pretty much the first one. What? I'm just going to take you back years, but what transpired that you were part of that group? How did it come off? I mean, we know how it came off, but how did they think of it?
Well, Crowe is a very good thinker of the game, Marty Crowe. And so with Warren Lees, who was the coach, and Warren Lees, wicket-keeper, batsman, played for New Zealand. In fact, he toured Pakistan in '76 when Javed got that big double 100 against New Zealand. So Lees had been around the scene for a long time and was quite open to that. So I think the two of them worked very well together, and Warren Lees allowed Crowe to have that more lateral thinking and stuff going on. And when you look at New Zealand cricket grounds, Salman, they were very much shared with rugby, so quite small, and the pitches got quite worn. So in terms of not being very pacey and bouncy back then, and pace off the ball, Crowe could realise that it was so unique and different, because all opening batsmen were used to facing quick bowling, medium pace bowling. And so this was right out of the box left field. And Deepak had to be confident too to start with the new ball. And the other thing about that is that Deepak Patel had to be up for it, but in first class cricket as well, because Deepak came from Worcestershire, and he played in New Zealand club cricket, and then he wanted to stay because he married an Indian lady, Veena, from Auckland. So he wanted to make his home there. So in playing for Auckland, he sometime on our really benign pitch out the back, the number 2 ground at Eden Park, where the World Cup semi-final was, behind there used to be like a bit of the nursery ground at Lord's, but a bit bigger than that. And often in the 4th innings of a first-class match, a 3-day game, sometimes Deepak would even open the bowling because one end was quite worn and the pitch was so rough and dry that he would often bowl a lot of overs, even if it was just 2 overs from one medium pacer and another 3 overs from another medium pacer. Dip would be on, and a guy called Bill Fowler or John Bracewell, another good New Zealand off spinner, and those guys would be into it and have to bowl with quite a new ball. So Deepak was up for that, and it proved a really good initiative.
Absolutely, exactly. I mean, it's changed the way we bowl now, like the way captains approach bowling in ODI cricket or limited overs cricket. So, I'm going back years again. You played for an extremely good New Zealand team, Kiwi team, which competed really well across the formats, across the world, except for when it came to Pakistan. For some odd reason, something went off every time they played Pakistan in your days. What happened?
I think really when you think about that period you're talking about, really, which was 1990 through to late 95, 96, you ran into a couple of immovable forces called Wasim and Waqar, which were pretty extraordinary. And Mushtaq was starting to come along. You had a very good batting lineup, very aggressive young guys. Javed captained that side 1990 up to about that, and then off and on when Imran wanted to play and didn't. And Imran finished in 92 World Cup. But you really had the essence of a very good side with batting, quick bowlers, Aqib Javed thrown in there as another, part of the show. And then your spinners. You often had good guys to go to. And then I think really for us, those guys were in their pomp. They ran us over in the 92. I remember they came out for a one-off test and they played one days. Dynamic. Beat us. Waqar and Wasim took 2-5 each in the second innings. 93?
93.
I remember that vividly. We should have won that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then was it 94, 95? They came out again. It was the beginning of 94, sorry. And then they came out for a one-off test in Christchurch in 95. It seemed like every other summer we were playing and hosting Pakistan. And they loved it. And I think the conditions suited when it was a little bit green at times. The 2 Ws and Aqib and co, very, very handy. And you're right. I think those guys were in their pomp. And so, you think back to some footage you can go on YouTube, blowing guys away, whether it was Test cricket or white ball 50-over cricket. The 2 Ws, extraordinary.
And you played that test in 1993. I believe it was Napier or
Hamilton.
Hamilton, yeah. And it was just an extraordinary display of bowling because at one point New Zealand were 63 for 2. And then, boom, blown away for 1993. I remember that. Yeah,
that in terms of when the ball, as we all knew, got a bit older and their tails up. And I think that was a great thing. When Pakistan got a sniff, and going about blood in the water, going like sharks circling. They got a great sniff, and so then it's like you get 1, 2, 3, 4, bang, bang, bang. They can do that, particularly in that middle order. And they just run through sides, and you can't. They're coping with that late reverse swing.
I guess between all the unpredictability Pakistan brought, that was one predictable thing back in the days. That once they get in, they'll take over. Right?
Oh, they can, and they were an extraordinary side. When you think about, regardless of people bitching and moaning about tampering with the ball, then we all found out that once you got one side rough, and whether that was we all scratched it and tried to hurry up the aging process. Some did it a bit more rigorously than others. That 92 series, I think they beat England 2-1.
Yeah,
and that's where it got a lot more exposed about fiddling with the ball a bit.
Absolutely.
But that Duke ball, as we know, goes a lot more with reverse. And so, when you look at that team, man, they were powerful.
Oh, absolutely. But Danny, you brought that with you to the 1996 World Cup as well, the reverse swing. Right?
Yeah, white balls. The white ball does tend to, and it was also they scuffed up quickly.
Because of the rough grounds in Pakistan and India in '96, right?
Yeah, and I think if you look after the ball well enough. And back then, they didn't really change it after 34 overs. They started to, or then they bring in 2 balls. And that went against the bowler again because, of course, the batter wants to see it cleaner and harder and shinier to belt further. Was a great arsenal for quick men and for spinners alike, really, because then the spinner could come into it and grip it and get drift as well in the 50-over game. But then again, I can't remember what it was. I think I might have been just finished playing around then. Yeah, and they started to say, look, okay, at around 34 overs, mandatory you change the ball, which was just a pain in the butt because, of course, it took out the beauty of reverse and swinging it differently.
Between you and I, like, did that take away the competitiveness or the even contest that could have happened last time? Has that done that to the cricket?
I think so. It was the game got so much more buff bang about, then the bats got bigger in this 21st century, and then suddenly getting 250 to 280 to 300 to 350, you know what I mean? It went up and up and it got big. So now, because of 2020, of course, the batsmen are more aggressive and find different ways with scoops and reverse flicks and dabs, have adapted amazingly. And that's great. But at the same time, you think, well, let's not have two balls and make it a bit more difficult. But then again, the crowd and the entertainment and everything goes, we love watching the ball disappear, going a long way. But to be fair, you got a guy called Lasith Malinga and Jasprit Bumrah of late. When you get that Yorker right, you've got it on tap and you can just call on it any time with a new ball or old ball, slow Yorkers, you get that right. So bowlers are, have fought their way back in a bit and adapting. And then, of course, Salman, everyone wants a wrist spinner. Everyone, mate. And who thought that was T20 would have been the death of spinners? Well, out of the top 10, I think, is it 7, a wrist spinners or left arm orthodox. Spinners in T20 dominate because of that pace off the ball. And if it does rip and go a little, then look out.
Absolutely. So, you talked about entertainment. You talked about all that stuff, the noise, all the fun that comes with the cricket that is happening nowadays and all the runs that are scored. Now, as an analyst, as a commentator, how much do you enjoy that? But do you feel for these players out there?
The bowlers?
The bowlers, the extra pressure that they go through. Like, do you feel like, oh boy, I feel like I've been in their shoes? Do you feel that way?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and batters, when you look at it, the white ball is geared around batsmen striking it big and making the ball disappear or smashing it for 4. You love a contest where the ball, if it is bouncy and coming on, just might have just a little bit of sideways if you're good enough to hit it, the string and do something. And then will it change subtly? No, it shouldn't in 40, in 40 overs, should it? But then are you, both under lights? The only problem you get there, Salman, you find in the subcontinent and even in Australia and New Zealand, is that the later it gets onto the night, the dew starts to come in. Yeah. Now, that can either affect the bowler holding the ball and it's easier for the batters, or does it go around a bit more and the side batting at a different time in the sort of night, twilight, whatever, gets to struggle. I feel for the bowlers a bit, but at the same time, we're adaptable souls, aren't we, bowlers? You've got to. And the other side of the coin, I suppose, you look at Salman in the modern game and the money in the game, and you think, well, buggers, you only get to bowl 4 overs. You're going to get to bowl 4 overs. You get to make a lot of good money out of something you love doing. So you've got to get that right. And if you want to stay on the side, and it can be fickle, I know that's tough in franchise T20. But as I said, the bowlers can have a big say and come back and when you're chasing it 8, 9, 10s, 11s and over, and you've got a Bumrah coming or Lasith in the past, very difficult to get away if they get the Yorkers right or wide Yorkers, and the guys moving around the crease and they get it right and they're smart, or the tennis ball bouncer and it's not quite there and you feel like about 5 shots that it doesn't arrive. Well, that's smart. And so, I think bowlers, at some nights you're just going to disappear, but other nights, you can have a great time of it, getting it right.
So, Danny, when you played back in the days, you prepared for these games. Now you're very up close and personal with these players that are playing so many leagues. You see them pretty much on some daily basis when you're in that league or you're hosted that. How do you find them preparing for these games now versus what you did back in the day? Has that come around? Has it changed dramatically?
Yeah, dramatically, because now there's sharing of dressing rooms that have constantly now changed across the spectrum of guys in the IPL or the Pakistan Super League or Bangladesh or here in the Caribbean. You do, because that's part of your trade, and whether you still can play a bit of test cricket, and there are guys that can be multifaceted across all 3 formats, It's great to see. You've got a Virat Kohli rubbing shoulders with A.B. de Villiers or a Chris Gayle or an Andre Russell, and they're in your team and they're in your dressing room. And then 2 months down the track, you're playing each other in a test series with a white ball and red ball and white clothing, trying to knock each other's heads off. So when you look at that, the information sharing, I think, is fabulous for the younger guys coming through. I think that's really important. And I think it's fabulous for them to be alongside basically some of their heroes to then discuss things and work on things and help them pass that knowledge on and work on their game. So there's a lot more sharing. It's a bit like, I suppose, technology. Salman, we're doing this, aren't we, on a Zoom scenario?
Absolutely.
That
Absolutely.
Phones and technology and interconnecting the world is a bit like that with sport, particularly cricket as a global game. I find it fascinating. And it's great to see because you really notice those that want to be in there helping other guys.
Yeah.
It's a great landscape now from that perspective.
So, Danny, like, how much pressure does it put on the player when you're, sharing a dressing room with somebody in an IPL team or in a franchise team? You're sharing your trade secrets with them because they're your teammates, and next thing you're going and playing against them. You have to keep updating your skills at all times to stay ahead of the person. Like, how do you do that in cricket nowadays?
Well, also some of the technology that's around. And here's a classic example. I've been watching the test match today from Manchester in England.
Yeah.
Is that you had Shan Masood, wonderful 150, but the great thing there was that the commentary on Sky, they were showing how he played on the previous tour and was getting out where Broad and Anderson were coming around the wicket and he was nicking out a lot. Whereas now he would have seen that footage, worked on his game, and left the ball. And it was fascinating to see the guys in the commentary, the third man thing, and someone comes up with a bit of analysis and they talk about it. And I think it was Shane Warne. He was showing, look how many he was leaving. I think it was just 2 or 3 years ago, the tour before, and he was nicking out. He was only leaving about 3%. The innings today, he was leaving 20%. So he could see what he had done wrong and was getting out in a certain way. So now he was adapting. And to answer your question, I think you're right. You have to keep on top or ahead of the game to adapt what you're doing against certain bowlers. And certain bowlers will know what certain batters do, how they've been going about it. Like Andre Russell, when he was smashing at the IPL last year, and he was hard to stop. And then people would have sat down and gone, hang on a minute, look where he's going, his feet movement. I'm going to chase him. Instead of trying to bowl wide Yorkers or a tennis ball bouncer, which you still do, you've got to just be brave enough and pick the right moment and the right ball of an over. Just go, hang on. And we talked about this in commentary. It's interesting from a bowling perspective that the other delivery that would come up was if the ball was slightly tailing and he was going for it towards the end and the ball might have been, around 15, 16, 17, 18 overs old, was that Yorker at his front foot was the way to go, was to even you watch the move. So a bowler's quick off a long run and get into his bowling action and watch where Andre Russell would move to. Say it was slightly leg side or he just, opened up side, was to get that ball just subtly tailing and smash into his front foot, the left foot, and get it right up on there. So then he couldn't get underneath you, couldn't try and free his arms because that had closed down the angles, even if he'd given himself a bit of room. Was the way to go. And it's fascinating as the bowlers, some of them picked up on it and went with it and it had success with it and blunted him a bit.
So, Danny, being a player in this environment with this franchise cricket and all that stuff, you go from one top-notch coach to another top-notch coach, right? For 2 weeks. Like, how much does that contribute to a player in the development piece when you're going from one coach to another, sometimes 4 coaches in a year, right? How does that contribute? How would that?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to some players and they'll often have a guy that's in their own country where they domicile and they'll have a go-to coach to go back to, whether it's a batting, spin bowling coach, pace bowling coach. They tend to have their guy that they work with back home where they live. And then they listen to other guys, and you do. And it's about what you want to take on or try not to get too cluttered. And I think that's the key with the modern player today, that you're up for and you're open to listening and trying something subtly new. And I think you do. I think you have to be, without getting too perhaps overwhelmed with too much information, is that there'll be different coaches that'll work for you. And I think also if you're an international senior player, you are mature enough to know that whilst you take some of that on, you don't have to. And I think that's where this sort of scenario, where if you're having a problem, you pick up the phone or do a FaceTime call with your coach back home and say, look, I've been, and you say Barry's been watching Jimmy Neesham run, and Barry goes, look, I've been watching where your feet are going, and I just think you've got a little bit wider on the crease at times. I think you want to get back in closer, or just try this, or maybe I just noticed your front arm's just falling away a bit early. All of those little things that they can catch up with, because the coach, more than likely, if he's worth his salt, is watching your performance of your athlete that you've brought up and had a lot of time with. And that's the beauty of it, Salman. You can do that and watch that. But in answer to your question, I just don't think guys get too hung up and wound up and freaked out with that, because you need a good mentor where you domicile.
Pretty much, yeah. You got to have a home base when it comes to coaching.
Yeah,
exactly. I'll get to the last part of the show. The question that I'm going to, a couple of questions back, you talked about IPL. You've been attached to pretty much every single franchise league in the world for the past many years. So I'm going to focus on the one that my viewers are very close to, which is PSL. How far has PSL come in terms of getting closer, bridging the gap between PSL and IPL, bringing it back home? Is this going to help bridge that gap?
Oh, without a doubt. That's just a no-brainer, because the frustration, IPL started in 08, and of course the Pakistan players were allowed to play in that, of course, until late November 08 with the terrorist attacks. So they couldn't play in it post the first year. And then on top of that, well, that wasn't bad enough. There was at November in Mumbai and what have you. You've got the shootings at Gaddafi outside in March of 09. So you had a double whammy. And then, of course, Pakistan had to play in the UAE. And so that shunted and moved anything that Pakistan could have started to get around, which didn't happen until 2017. So we've only just had PSL 5.
Yeah, absolutely.
That just got shut down with the playoffs because of COVID. But that was season 5. So only had 5. So when you look at how the difference between how long the IPL has been going since 08, there really is that big, broad gap. And that's the frustration, I think, for Pakistan players, that the ones that had a taste of it once in 08, that can't go back to India for obvious reasons. And so Pakistan Super League, and again, being involved with that, seeing the crowds is the biggest issue. And for fans to see their own homegrown superstars plus international stars of quality coming to play in it, was extraordinary. I was in Multan this year, loved it, hadn't been to Multan. I've been obviously up to Rawalpindi and Lahore and Karachi, and all of that sort of scenario, but hadn't been to Multan, and they were just so passionate about it. And it was amazing, the atmosphere there. I mean, you could have sold it twice over. It was like sort of 30,000 people in the stadium. There's another 30 outside. So you're right, it's a no-brainer to have it back there. And frustratingly, look what's happened with COVID. And again, it's just so frustrating for the movement of Pakistan cricket and where they're going. Yeah. And look what it's done. I mean, look at today. I mean, I watched Shah Massoud get that 100 and change through the gears beautifully about grinding it and surviving the first new ball, hanging in there with Babar Azam, having a partnership, then surviving the second new ball. Then when the tail was in, he showed his flair that he shows in white ball 20 over cricket, Shah Massoud. And to look at the way he went about that innings, because he showed that in PSL and playing at home and having interviewed some of these guys, what it means to them to be able to play in front of a full house at home inspires you and helps your all-round match play. So it was no surprises there was that. Now that you've got COVID, IPL's happening in the UAE. That probably means, and I'm sort of crystal ball gazing and certainly no oracle, but I wonder whether that now, in terms of Pakistan cricket, to simply get cricket played in a tournament, may have to go back to the UAE in the short interim to do that. I mean, there's a T10 in Abu Dhabi that's been going 3 years, but to have it because of COVID and because of the sheer numbers in the subcontinent, that's all of the 4 countries that play Test cricket we're talking about, is massive. And so the spreading of this very contagious virus isn't going to go away in the short term, you'd have to say. And so, you think what ESL's February, March. My beauty in thinking of it, at least, thank goodness, at least there's the option if they keep it clean, and because Dubai is a young city that's sprouted out of the desert in the last 2 decades, you've got infrastructure, you've got cleanliness. You know what I mean? You can actually, and whatever they're spraying or whatever it is to hose down, wash down buildings is a thing they can do. And so I look at India. Everyone will be looking after, they'll be firstly looking to CPL because it's going to start the first franchise. CPL, see how that goes. Let's look towards then the IPL will kick off not long after, straight after it. And let's see how that unfolds in the UAE for the likes of Pakistan, perhaps playing PSL 6 there. Who knows?
So you're sitting in the Caribbean right now and preparing for the CPL. Are you finding the preparations different than it has been for the past many years? Quite different?
Oh, very. I mean, for the start, when we arrived and everyone's, all the staff are in the big white hooded outfits and spraying your bags down, and understandably so, they're going to extreme lengths, and rightly so. Very grateful for the Trinidad and Tobago government when it take this time. There's a lot of work behind the scenes. So all 6 franchises are here, and all the CPL staff and all our television production and everything are here. So we're in the Hilton, and look, I'll give you a quick zap out the back here, right? Out of the room. So out here, and it's raining now. Look at that, it's raining. Oh, wow. And so look at that, and there's a balcony, and that was the thing about having this hotel as a big base was because of the balcony, and actually just have fresh air to come in, and to wander out, because ultimately you're in your room and we're not allowed out of here for the first 7 days. Wow. So 7 days lockdown, and look, that's all just part of it. And then on post the 7 days out of the room, because they deliver the food on trays outside and they knock on the door and then you grab it and come in. It's all disposable, plasticky, like lunchbox or going to takeout. So day 8, I think we're hopefully going to be allowed to move out of our rooms and then just go upstairs, and they're going to have sit-down sessions. I think there's going to be 3 sessions to use the restaurant, and you've only got 45 minutes, but you've got to eat, and I think you'll be taken in your groups, whatever. But at least to be able to go outside of it, there's a big open area on the terrace here that we could all, a few of us at a time could go out and have a wander around. Then, of course, there's the 2 venues, Salman. You've got Queen's Park Oval in town, just as I looked out the window there, not far across the savannah. And then the other one's the Brian Lara Academy Oval, and that's where the finals will be played. And they've got that as another development ground. It'll be fascinating. It'll be fascinating, something because the crowds. Yeah, they're saying behind closed doors. It'll be amazing to see if that can be tweaked. Who knows? I mean, again, because crystal ball gazing, down into the tournament, how's COVID going? There's no real spikes or, outbreaks. So, well, let's see. At the moment, I think at the start of it will be empty stadia, which is a real shame, because you think about any of the tournaments, it's about the fan base and the noise and the atmosphere will be, different.
IPL this year is going to feel like PSL for the first 4 years. That's all I can say.
with people, and that too will be fascinating. When the IPL in the UAE, which they did for 2 weeks in 2014 because of the election, you can great when you fill it, but I believe maybe a third full. I think they're trying to work out whether they can get, say, maybe 30% of the stadium with fans. Let's wait and see about that too. That's an unknown entity.
Exactly, and there's so much still left to happen for us to figure before we can get there. Absolutely. So,
for sure.
Danny, it's been wonderful talking to you. I'm going to ask you $1 million question. I'm going to take you back to your playing days. What do you enjoy the most, playing or being in the position you are now? Which one would you pick if you're given another life? If you were to do it all over again?
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because I mean, you can never really beat your playing days because you can only do it in your youth, let's say 20 to 30. So there's your 20s to do that. And, of course, now they play a lot longer and they go right into their 30s for obvious reasons. Which do you like most? I mean, again, being a hobbit, geez, quick bowling was tough. And I look at the great Wasim Akram at 6'3" and that beautiful wrist and just fast arm, zing zing. Different world for him, and you can see why he was so successful. When I look back, which would I choose? It's such a funny one because it's two parts to your life. Yeah. Your playing days, and you've got to make the most of that. And then when I look at now, I mean, I'm truly humbled and grateful for the whole revolution of T20, which came in that World Cup of it in 2007 when India played Pakistan in Joburg. So when you think back to then and how it all opened up with the IPL, and then the Aussies got serious about the Big Bash and all that sort of thing. England, isn't it fascinating with England? I mean, they spread their T20 out over a whole summer still. They need a window, and they're talking about this 100-ball thing, which is all now because of COVID changed. But crazy that they haven't really got a specific window. But that's England, and they can do things differently there, and all those different formats spread over the whole summer. But yeah, I mean, I love it. I love them both, and it's a fascinating question. It really, in a way, I probably can't answer and give you the $1 million answer because you love doing both. Clearly, commentary can last longer. So like I've done this now for 20 years and still having fun with it because physically it's not as demanding as playing, obviously. So you love doing both, and I'm just blessed that for a lot of us to be able to travel and still see and call a game live. And have all that atmosphere and all that difference from Test cricket to 50-over cricket to this franchise T20 and now a bit of T10. It's just incredible. It really is incredible.
Don't you have to, would you agree, you have to lead a singer's life? Keep clothes on your throat? What you're having? What
I've got
eating?
to stop those cigars, I know. Just dumb. Cigars and scotch. What are you doing? But yeah, in moderation. Everything's in moderation, Salman.
Yeah, exactly.
But
You gotta take care of your work, hey?
Yeah, and you feel think about that, and you think, wow. And then of course COVID comes along, and then with relatives dying and stuff, and you think, wow. And you just think, oh, right. I mean, life. What's it all about? And I just again truly, again, I know it's a cliche. And it goes, every day, every week, every month, you just breathe it all in and enjoy it because you just where's this planet heading, and what are we doing as a human race? It just seems crazy, doesn't it?
And you know what? I'm going to go to the last question, which I've always wanted to ask you, and now you're here, so I will take the opportunity. You've been wonderful as a strike bowler for New Zealand. You played your cricket in the best of your spirit. As a commentator, as an anchor, as an analyst, you've been wonderful. In between, what happened to your batting?
My batting, I left it in my suitcase. I didn't bring it with me. I just left it there. I know, fascinating.
You know what I'm going there was a lot of
It was when I look at it there back on it, and I laugh because at grammar school, I batted about 6 and played some sensible innings, and I really had the confidence kicked out of me when I started to play first class cricket because my older adversaries if you get out, I'm going to shove the bat where the sun doesn't shine, and they'll be right on your case, and you just want to, I don't want to get out, so I'm not going to get out. I'll just try and be all solid and in behind it and just play for the guy at the other end who was senior pro, obviously better than me at batting. And things, and you sort of, I don't know, become a bit of a shrinking violet because at times, you played shots and do it in the nets or slog it here in that club cricket, whatever. But, and to be fair, I mean, again, and I'm not being downplaying or what have you and just giving myself absolute crap here. You're up against the two W's, the two W's, you got Alan Donald, you had the Aussies with all their different quick bowlers at you. And seriously, a lot of the times it was whistling around your ear holes or you're digging out Yorkers and losing your bowls. And so, it wasn't much fun. But at the same time, isn't it fascinating how the game's changed where everyone bats properly, everyone learns to bat better, everyone has to be aggressive because of T20, and you have to be about hitting the ball and being a bit more positive. Whereas, again, at our day, it was at Stonewall Jackson, the likes of myself, like Glenn McGrath, you just didn't do enough work on it. And at the end of the day, you're just a bit of a slave to run up and bowl in the nets to all the senior batters, which I love doing. I'm not complaining.
Absolutely. So how important, leading up to that, how important has it become for bowlers now to be able to bat?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. And not just about holding an end up. Now, look, here's a classic example that we saw today where I heard Nasser Hussain, he rightly said that it's a really old-fashioned batting lineup. When you look at the tail that was in of Pakistan, they were okay up till they were about sort of 5 or 6 down, and you had you had Shadib Khan, the young leg spinner, who's developing his batting a better. You looked at the quick men, the real, as I call, where we batter the old engine room chuggers, that can get knocked over very quickly.
Very quickly.
And that you need guys that can actually hang around. I mean, Stuart Broad lost his confidence, and he got 100 against Pakistan at Lords, didn't he? 10 years ago,
absolutely.
right? And he could play shots, and he showed it again with some confidence. But it just shows you when your confidence gets badly knocked, and he got hit badly, didn't he? And everyone just started bombing him.
Yeah.
And tall man, and there's a lot of them to hit. So they worked out. Do not pitch it up, a bit like Gale. Do not allow him to hit through and go down the ground, big wide V. You've got to get it whistling into his cage or his throat, chest, for obvious reasons. So it just shows you with a bit of confidence and change your game. It just shows your abilities there. And with Broad, even batting as far down as he does, was still useful. And you get your useful runs. Even I think Jimmy Anderson, didn't Jimmy Anderson get a 50 once or something batting right down the end? I mean, Jimmy still, you wouldn't mind bowling to Jimmy and getting him out. When
you talk about Pakistan's tail, Yasir Shah not too long ago got a century against the Australian side in Australia. I don't know if it was an inning out of fortunate innings or it was actually proper cricket.
He has talent. Yeah. Oh, definitely. And if he just, again, that's another confidence thing, because he has got shots, clearly, because I remember watching the 100 at Adelaide. Wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
When you think about that, it was actually really lovely, because Shane Warne got out for 99 against New Zealand, never got a test 100.
Yeah, exactly.
And Warne was fairly useful. He got a couple of scores in the 90s and got out. And then you think, Shadib, I think Anil Kumble got 100, didn't he?
He did.
At least got one, didn't he? Yeah. So, Warne, it still grates Warne, because he was actually out off a no ball. Dan Vittori, there was a no ball, and he got caught at the whacker by, I think, Mark Richardson. They shot a lot back in New Zealand.
Exactly.
To wind up Warne. But exactly. I think you're right. The batting has developed for tail enders, and they just really have to bat better than we did back in our day.
Yeah. Well, the joke there was last year about three-dimensional players is a reality now, unfortunately.
Yes.
You almost have to be, multifaceted just to survive nowadays. Thank you, Danny. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate you giving me the time and giving our viewers. We went a bit earlier than what I'd planned, but I appreciate you doing this. I can't thank you enough. Any final parting words for our viewers?
Oh, well, keep watching and keep loving the game. It's such a shame with COVID. Of course it is. But I think we also got to be grateful that there's cricket coming up. There's the Caribbean Premier League. You've got Test cricket on from England. Isn't it amazing? How happy are the ECP with Lancashire County Cricket Club in Hampshire having those hotels backing on a part of the stadium? That's fabulous. And then, of course, the IPL's happening in the UAE. There's a bit of T10 proposed. And so hopefully in terms of with more time elapsing, Salman, that can we get on top of COVID better so it allows a bit more so-called normality back of moving around as human beings and going to events. But at least this beautiful thing of television, we can show, actual competitive cricket again, as much as the fans aren't there to see it live. I think we've just got to be grateful that we can hopefully get this happening again.
Yeah, and as much as we're watching the Pakistan-England series right now, we're all looking forward to the CPL as well, because that'll mean a lot for the franchise cricket. The direction it's going to go, we're going to see that as well. So we're very much looking forward to that. Thank you, Danny, for joining us, and we hope to see more and more of you on BaatShaat and everywhere else as well. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you, and goodbye from my end.
Cheers, Salman.
Bye.
Cheers, gang.
That was Danny Morrison, who joined us all the way from Trinidad and Tobago, where he's stationed right now because of the CPL. It was a pleasure connecting with him. My apologies, we went a bit earlier than the originally planned live show, but you know what? Technology has been great at times when it works and sometimes when it doesn't work. We don't want to take any chance. Danny, we wanted to get a hold of him as soon as we can, and this was a time for us to go live. So please make sure you watch this video later on. Watch all of it. Share this everywhere. Make sure you like it, subscribe our channel, and keep watching BaatShaat. We are bringing you some extremely special episodes down the line. Do not forget, there's Azaz Shima's former Pakistani baseman, his interview coming up. We've done the recording as of this earlier this morning. We're going to be putting that live on later tomorrow, as well as none other than Vikrant Gupta, the wonderful sports editor from Sports Tuck or Aaj Tak or India Today, and he's a great journalist when it comes to covering cricket. We've all seen him plenty of times on many channels out there as well as YouTube. He's going to be joining us as well. We have plenty of great personalities coming on BaatShaat to share their thoughts, their opinions, their views, and we're going to be making sure we'll be bringing those out to you as we line them up. Make sure you keep following us, keep subscribing, because every time we go live, you will be able to see it regardless of what time it goes live. Thank you again for watching BaatShaat. This is your host Salman Khan signing out. It has been a pleasure bringing you this show once again, and keep watching BaatShaat. We'll see you again next time.